you for coming to the Architectural and Engineering Plans. This is sort of our little Architectural Engineering Plans 101. If you have deeper questions, you can answer them today, but you can also, always do a lunch and learn to go deeper into it. But we'll just kind of get started with the 101. I'm Erin. I'm an architect in Sacramento, working with Mobile Architects. This is Elton, my colleague. I'm Mobile as well. And so we're based in Sacramento. You shall stop by our booth and get some of our chocolate, and see some of our projects over there. We do affordable housing, student housing, both new construction, renovation, and some community and commercial projects as well. So let's get started on. You guys hear me okay? All right. I realize
You're a little soft.
a little soft. Okay, I'll try to stand closer to this, but it feels very close. All right. So for architectural drawings, we have different phases. We start with conceptual design, where we might do a yield analysis, a site analysis to see what some of the site constraints are, and for doing housing, how many units you could get on a site. And then from conceptual design, we move to schematic design, where we I'll go through some slides. So here's sort of a conceptual plan, yield analysis. So this is probably one of, I think in this project we have like 10 similar plans like this in the folder, where we're running through ideation, just sort of seeing what can fit on the site, what some of the site constraints are, what's required as far as utilities and parking. And we just color code it based on the client's program, as far as like brown being housing and blue being community space, yellow is utilities. Those are the upper floors of that same plan. And then we'll often do a massing study, so you'll see something like this during conceptual design. This isn't not an architectural model or trying to convey anything about how the building will look. It's just to convey massing, like how tall can this building be, what might be some of the setbacks of the different floors, and then again we're using the color coding based on the program. So that blue is the community areas, and brown is residential, and the pink is the stairs. And then at this stage, we're also doing things like maybe a little drawing to show some utility considerations. Like this project has power poles really close, so can we get the scaffolding in there when we're building it, or do we need to raise the pole or underground it or something? And then conceptual design, this is the time where we'll also even have, hand drafted things, and we're thinking about water. The kind of blue on the edge there is where we're gonna have the water storage and the swales. Sort of starting to think about how that's going to fit on the site. We're thinking about fire trucks. You see the red dash line driving and turning around so the fire truck can get in and the hose can reach every part of the building. And so this project right here, I have a site plan in all phases of design. So this is the conceptual design one. You can see we kind of got the hammerheads of to show the we're showing fire truck turnarounds, and we got our unit count and our parking count, and where trucks are going to turn around as far as trash. And when we get into schematic design, we're still looking at options here as far as the shape and look of the building and the site and the layout of the site and the layout of the building, but we're we're a lot more dialed in on the number of units and the program. And so during schematic design, this is also when we often use a schematic design set, or somewhere in between a conceptual and schematic, when you might need to submit for funding. So a schematic design set will usually have a site plan, some floor plans, some enlarged unit plans, and elevations. And those seem to be the things that help with applying for funding or applying for entitlements with the jurisdiction. And so that's sort of what we'll use the schematic design set for. And so we have information that is important to either funders or jurisdictions who are going to be giving entitlements, like the number of units and the number of parking and density and that. And then we move into design development. And so once we get into design development, that set, so that the schematic set is named the drawings that are in that. It's a much shorter set, maybe just a handful of pages. And when we get into design development, we lay out all the pages that are going to be in the final set, even if they don't really have much on them yet, we still lay them out. And, then we're getting up into like a page count of like 100 or so pages. And so at design development, by the end of design development, we want to have the layout completely finalized, the elevations finalized, we want to have the mechanical systems finalized, and so the end of design development is sort of a chance to look at that design development set and say, this is generally what we want for all of those items, and then we move forward with construction documents where we detail it. And so construction document set looks a lot like a design development set, it just has a lot more detail and it's ready to go to the city for building review or to a contractor for a bid.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. What percentages are associated with the 4 different phases of design?
In terms of like how much time they each take?
So schematic, what percent? Is it like, I'm sorry, conceptual is at like 15 to 30%, schematic 30, design drawings 60, and then CDs are like 100. So
Like as far as being done, percentage of completion? Yeah, I would say so. We usually do a percentage for each. Like when we get into CDs, we'll say we're at 50% CD with this set. This is a 50. Maybe like the contractor will ask for a 50% CD set to do a budget on, and it'll be is the set that the contractor wants to look at. So, but generally, conceptual design is a short phase, a short period of time. Schematic design maybe a little bit longer, and then construction documents is the longest, period of time that it's the most to do and to document everything.
Okay, so we want to take an opportunity to walk you all through some of the basic drawing conventions that you'll see in architectural and engineering plans from most any firm that you might be working with. So to start with, every drawing is typically going to be at a scale. You'll see the engineering scales on the left, and they work a little bit differently than architectural because their drawings are usually of a much bigger area. So your civil plans and your landscape plans might be drawn at 1 inch equals 20 feet, and you'll see you have a visual scale or what we call graphic scale that shows approximately 1 inch at the halfway mark, that's your 20 feet, and 2 inches would be about 40 feet, and that can kind of help you understand visually how much space you're looking at on the sheet. Architectural scales are generally looking at a more zoomed in portion of the building, and so our scales are a little bit smaller. So this top one would be, obviously this is not to scale because it is up on a board. But on the sheets that are on your table, a 1/4 inch, and actually the ones that are on your table are a half size set, so ignore everything I'm saying. But at a sheet that was printed out at 100% of its size, your scale for 1 inch would be 4 feet, and then the second inch would get you 8 feet. And so a lot of our drawings are done at 1/4 inch or 8 inch.
We couldn't carry those full-size sets in, so
They're big.
these are exactly half size, so any scale you see in there will be half of what it's at. You can still use these to scale if you need to scale something in paper.
So at the bottom here, there's a whole bunch of different types of north arrows. Architects like to get really fancy and creative with their north arrows, but it's definitely something that you want to pay attention to when you're looking at drawings, because ideally we would have our drawings always showing north pointed up, but sometimes there's an economical way to put your drawings on the sheet, and sometimes it makes sense to turn them. So it's something when we're presenting a project we like to call attention to, like, okay, sorry to confuse you, what you're seeing on your screen or on the board is actually turned 90 degrees, but it's something to just watch for. There's many different types of north arrows because we like to get fancy and put our stamp on, what an arrow looks like. So our drawings will have different line weights, and so you'll see on the left side there are different line thicknesses, and they all have different meanings when we're drafting on the computer. They're all in different colors, so we can differentiate, and you'll see that there's heavier lines, and then there's thin, lighter lines, some that go almost to gray. So the heavier lines indicate something that's being cut through, and so this is a little snippet of the floor plan, and you can see that the structure of the wall cut. But then there's lots of little tiny lines that make up this window, and so those are drawn in a lighter, thinner line weight so that they can be read more easily. Things that have, if you see walls that, aren't as heavy as other walls, they may be a partial height wall that's not actually being cut through. And we also have okay. So we also have different line types that are pretty standard to the industry. So like property line types are usually a dash, dot, dot, dash, dot, dot, dash. And so you can see we've kind of highlighted that in red on this portion of the site plan. And then we might have some dashed lines to represent setbacks or public utility easements. And those are reference lines, they're imaginary lines, they're not really there on the site, but we need to represent them in our drawings. And so we use these different line types. There's typically some sort of legend on the sheet or on one of the early sheets of a drawing set that will tell you what these mean. Something that's, dashed like this that indicates something shown on the floor above. So this will probably be kind of hard to see, but you'll see like the property line all the way around, usually like aligning with the sidewalk or something. And then coming in from the property line, you might see another dashed line that represents your setbacks or your utility easements. And then you've got some dark, heavy walls that represent the edge of the building and the individual units because those are being cut through. Okay, so moving into some abbreviations. I think we all know that there are a lot of acronyms in our industry and there's a lot of abbreviations, and architecture and engineering is no exception. So often our drawing sets, whether it's architectural of the building section, so it's got a marker at both ends and it slices all the way through the building. And I can't quite see what it says, but if you were to go to sheet A and look at drawing number 3, you would find this section view right here. So you would see, okay, it's cutting through this unit and it's cutting through this little outdoor space, and you can see this stair either in the distance or it's on the floor above and you can't see it or something like that. But so each of these little markers is going to indicate to you where you can find more information. And then from this section, you can see that we have additional call-outs, and this is going to take you to more information about that particular wall.
Question,
Yeah.
on the callouts,
Yeah.
how do you assume designation of which side you're looking from?
That's a good question. Okay. So your callouts have an arrow attached to them, and it is pointing in this direction. So if you were to slice through the building, you would be looking in this direction. And so you can see this wall is right here, and then this wall is here, and we're looking this direction. Now, if we were to go to this little tiny guy is a wall section, and he is looking this direction. Since the top of his arrow is pointing this way. And if we go back to this one, you can see the arrows are pointing in multiple directions, so you have multiple views that are available to look at in this room. Does that answer your question? Okay, so if we were to go follow whatever that says, detail number 15 on sheet A, we would find, here it is, detail number 2, of course, as we said, detail number 2 on A something. Okay, so this is looks like this is like a typical detail. This one is actually, funny enough, going in the opposite direction, but sometimes we'll have these kind of typical conditions that will detail up really thoroughly, and it might be slightly pointing the wrong direction, but the information remains the same. So you can see there's some sort of window or something, I can't quite see it, but you can see that it's represented over here, and then you've got your floor assemblies on each level, and then you've got your roof truss, and then your tail, rapid tail end on the side. And so probably on a different sheet, but you would follow this drawing number 2 on a whatever it might be, and you would be able to find more information. And so then once you're at this level of drawing information, this is probably at a slightly larger scale than this drawing, so you can see a little bit more information. As you go up in scale, you're going to get more information available to you. There are even more call-outs. These are going to be for typical details or unique conditions, but more than likely it's taking you, okay, if you go to this detail sheet, you can find out even more about how the framing is set up in here, how we're going to waterproof this, what the materials are, what some basic dimensions are going to be that we just couldn't show you at this scale. And so here's what, if we were to follow that detailed call out with its drawing number 1 on sheet A 8 point something, we would be able to see, okay, here's our wall framing, here's how our roof truss is coming into it. We've got some plates in here for all of this to be attached to. We've got our top plates. We've got our wall insulation, our plywood, and then here's our lap siding. And here's, one more detailed call out that's going to talk about the gutter and the fascia. Here's another detailed call out that's going to talk about some other things. So all of this information, like there's a ton of stuff packed in here that may not be of interest to you, and therefore why put it on, on this little tiny view when it can be placed somewhere else with more paper or real estate farther in the set. So that was a whirlwind, and in a little bit we're gonna kind of look through some drawing sets and answer more questions about that. Now we're gonna talk about what's in a full construction document set.
All right, so the construction document sets are on everybody's table. So the construction document set is that last phase. This is a set that you do a bid on and then you get a permit with. So here is what. So at the beginning of the set, there's usually project information. This is showing a cover sheet, and on the right, all that tiny text is the sheet index. So every sheet that's in the set, go ahead and look, at the sets as we go along. Every sheet that's in the set is listed there by discipline. So there's architecture, civil, structural. And then also on the cover sheet, you'll find the project team, which I've enlarged over there. So if you need to get a hold of someone, you can find their information, their email, their phone number on that sheet. Vicinity map just shows where within the city the project is. And then this is just sort of showing that within the architectural sheet index, we organize the drawings. There's sort of a convention for organizing drawings where site plans are always A1 and floor plans are always A2 point something, and large floor plans A3, and so on and so forth. And then architectural plans always start with an A. The number is always in the lower right-hand corner of the plan. And then the structural plans will start with an S, and civil with a C, and so on. So you can find different things by discipline. And then also in the project info in the first few pages, this is probably on the second page of most of the sets there is a project summary and an accessibility matrix. And the project summary is going to tell you what your construction type is and what your occupancy type is. And you'll probably have multiple occupancy types, but it'll also tell you whether or not different portions or all of the building has to be sprinklered, and what type of sprinklers you'll have. There'll often be a parking summary in this section, so that's a really good place to look if you're wondering, we wanted 1-to-1 parking, but actually no, we want 1.5 to 1 parking. So this is a place to look for parking, and the parking summaries are pretty extensive because we go through not just how much parking is required by the jurisdiction, but how much the client wants, and then also how much is EV parking and how much is accessible parking, and then how much is accessible EV parking. So really gets extensive. And then we have a unit count there as well, and so the unit count will tell you, do we have the mix that we signed up for? That's in there. How many 3 bedrooms? How many 1 bedrooms? And the site area is usually there, and you can figure out the density from this page. There's a lot of information in very small print. Again, these are half-size sets, So, usually you'll probably have a digital copy of these sets where you can zoom in. And if you're really strong, you can get a full-size set and carry that around. So the other thing that the red box is around, I'll zoom into, is the accessibility matrix. And so, particularly for affordable housing, we're using the 11B chapter of the California Building Code, which has, requirements for accessibility, as does tax credit funding, which is above and beyond code. And so what we'll put in this matrix is, there's two types of accessible units, adaptable and mobility. And we'll put what is required, and we make it clear in this matrix often that, this is for TCAC funding, so often, the code will require 5% and TCAC will require 10%. When we go to the plan check, they'll say, you only need 5%, and it's like, there's another reason. So we usually put that in there just to make it really clear, and then we'd say which units are mobility, which units are adaptable, and then when you get to an accessibility site plan, you'll see what's over on the right, where you kind of see unit 2A, and then it's in building, building D101, and then under it is MO, and that's the code for mobility that you'll also see over here. And then some of them would have an A for adaptable or a C for like communication features. So that's, and then another thing you'll find in the early pages, along with a bunch of notes and the abbreviations that Allison spoke about, is the deferred approval items. So when we go in for a permit, there'll be things that we are not yet having the city review that'll be deferred items. And some of those are design build things, and oftentimes it's the roof trusses, fire sprinklers, and fire alarm.
Solar.
Yeah, solar, it seems like less often that's being allowed for.
It depends on the jurisdiction for sure. And elevators also sometimes.
Yeah.
are part of this.
Yep, and roof trusses, we're finding some pushback on deferring those as well. So something to check into early, in case you need to get a truss manufacturer on board early. There's a bunch of code sheets in the A0 section that refer to code. It's code analysis. And one of the things that we put in there is to do with the energy code. And so back in the mechanical drawings, we'll have the Title 24 report printed out and put on the drawing sheets. And man, that thing is dense. And like reading through that to just try to find like, what is the insulation in this? What level of insulation do we have? Is tricky. So we do a little summary of it early on where we say the insulation levels for the roof, the walls, whether or not it has a radiant barrier, and just kind of the kind of stuff if you want to do a quick check, like, actually we want more insulation than that, or we're going for the certain funding that requires a radiant barrier, this or that. You can check in these early sheets. And then another thing that you'll find on the early sheets are revisions. So when we first submit to plan check and they give us comments and we change things, we need to document what we changed, both for the plan checker and for the contractor and the client, and like if the bid has already been done, we would cloud it, and so they would know what has changed. And so those changes could happen because of a plan check comment, because of a change requested by the client, or a change requested of the budget. So whenever we have a change, we have a little revision schedule on the cover sheet. And then whatever sheet has a change on it, we'll have also in the title block over here, there'll be a revision schedule if there's a change on that sheet. And then what that looks like is, and it could be anything. In this case, we're changing the added sheets, so we're changing the index, but it could be a cloud like that around, a door that would change. So it's just a cloud, and then the delta with the 2 in it means that was changed during delta 2. So if the plan checker had already checked delta 1, and now if they're doing another round, they're only looking at the things in the delta 2 box. So this is a site accessibility plan that's in the early pages too, and we usually show, if it's a 3-story project, we would show all 3 floors on here with the upper was smaller, and the reason for that is, you can look at your sets on your table, they're small, but we put the unit numbers on all of these, so this is helpful if you end up talking to the post office and they're like, we need an addressing plan. This sheet will usually have all the unit numbers and whether it's a mobility unit, an adaptable unit, and then this sort of path of travel. this dark dash line is going along the sidewalks, showing this mostly for plan check that, you know, all of these places are an accessible path of travel from a parking spot all the way to a unit to anywhere, to your pool, anywhere that you would need to go on the site, you can get via an accessible path. Over here, the legend, you know, shows how we say the unit address and then whether it's a mobility unit and any information like that. All right, so after the general information and the code sheets, we get into site plans. And so a lot of times we'll have a two-phase project or something, so maybe the first site plan will actually be a phasing plan, and one side will maybe be grayed out, and then there'll be, we need to get it at a bigger scale. So the next one will just be the phase we're working on, so that'll be the site plan. And so this is a site plan sheet over here on this side, and then this is like a little zoom in of that site plan sheet. And you can see, you know, we work with civil and landscape, and we get all of their line work, and then we lay their line work in our CAD program, you know, underneath our line work. So these trees are coming in from landscape, and these sidewalks and parking stalls are coming in from the civil engineer. And then we also have these same detail call-outs that Allison was talking about, like this one, the dash line is going around the accessible parking, and then it says, look at 14A 1.3. So while we're still in the A1 section, which is the site drawing, we have site details. So this is the site detail sheet, and this is that detail that I was just showing you, so 14A 1.3. So you come to A 1.3, and then 14's over here somewhere, oh, it's right here. And then this is the blow up of 14, or the zoom in of 14, I guess, which shows, you know, everything we need for these parking stalls, including like how thick to paint these lines and how much space you need and what the slope can be. And after site plans, we get to the A2 sheets, and the A2s are the floor plans. And so floor plans will be like site plans. If it's a large building, we'll show like an overall floor plan, and then we'll break it, we'll have a match line, and we'll say like, we need to show this at a bigger scale, so we're gonna show half of it on these sheets and half of it on these sheets. And the floor plans are usually numbered A2.1 for the first floor, or A2.2 for the second floor, and so on. In this case, it's like A2.11A, because this, you can see right here is a match line, and this part is grayed out, but this building goes on this, you know, further down this way. So this is sort of the zoomed in floor plan. Oh, and then this is a key plan down here that just shows exactly what I was talking about. Like the gray part of this building is what's showing on this plan. You would have to go to A211B to see this white part of the plan. So these little things are key plans, and oftentimes those will have elevation markers pointing at them if you're on an elevation sheet or something. So we'll look a little bit more closely at a floor plan by zooming into this section and some of this legend over here. These are keynotes up here, you know, same that you saw on the kitchen plan. So I feel like this is a little bit blurry, but on the floor plan sheet will have a fire rating legend, and so this wall is a 1 hour fire barrier. It's like using this darker gray. And this is a 1 hour fire partition, and then this is a 1 hour bearing wall, and then this is a non-rated wall with no fill in it. So you can see going around this trash room, we have the fire barrier, and then, you know, along here we just have the gray fire partition, and then within the units, this is the bearing wall, so that has to be 1 hour. And then these other walls are just, they don't have any sort of pattern in them, and they're unrated. And then we also have wall tags. So you'll see these little tags right here that have a dot on the wall, and it connects to this tag with a bunch of letters and numbers in it. And then that is described here, where, and it says at the top of this, for wall tags, see sheet A11.2 or something. And then I think the N is for whether it's rated or not, or no, the N is the number on the sheet. This is very blurry. I don't know if we can unblurry that, but it'll say, when you get to A11, you'll be able to find drawing N, and then it'll say, you know, whether it's rated, and if it's a 2x6 or 2x4, that's sort of what these different parts of this wall take indicate. Some drawings would just have just a letter like wall B, and it doesn't have the further information, but depending on which set you have. All right, so then this is that sheet that it would take you to when it says, you know, sheet A11 for wall types. And then these are floor plan views of all the different wall types. So we have double walls with insulation. These are all interior walls, but this would be sound insulation. And then, you know, it's telling you, you know, we need 2 layers of gypboard, this insulation, and then a 1-inch air gap, another row of studs, and then, you know, one layer of gypboard. And so all that information is in there. The fire rating is listed on there, the sound rating. All right, part of the floor plans in the A2s are also the roof plans. And roof plans will often have mechanical equipment on them and walking, this hatch pattern is showing walking pads around those mechanical units. Here's a zoom in of a roof plan, and these hatch patterns with the dash around them are showing the areas that we've allocated for solar equipment. Either this one is PV, I think, or this one's PV, and this one is hot water solar. And so those aren't showing the actual solar, it's just we've allocated this area. Structural has said this much area can be used for it. We've let plumbing know not to put any vents in that area. So it's not the actual solar, it's just the area allocated for it. The dash lines here that you're seeing, this is the wall below. Usually if something's dashed, it's like above or below, so there's all doors to the units and then they're inset. And over here, this is the wall below. This 7.3 keynote is calling out a roof vent, that's a roof vent right there. This 5.1 keynote is calling out the gutter. And then after roof plans, we get into the A3s, which is enlarged plans. And enlarged plans are usually unit plans. And unit plans is a chance for us to dimension the interior of the unit. So in construction drawings, you know, we have strings of dimensions like this, and we dimension that. And then also unit plans are a place to put a call out to bring you to the kitchen plans. And then also we sometimes will show in gray where soffits are, if we have soffits in the units. And then this gray box at the door is to show clearance we need for accessibility and just, you know, to make sure we have that. So if you see a gray box like that, you're like, why don't we just make this closet bigger? Well, we can't encroach on that gray box. All right, finish, door, and hardware schedule. This sheet is going to be hard to see at half-size set, but it can be done. So this sheet is where, so on the floor plans, you'll see tags on all the walls and windows, and those tags will connect to the door and window schedule. So if you see a little tag by the window, you can come here and find it on the door schedule, or you can just go to the door schedule and it tells you what rooms they go to. But at the top there's a legend like this that shows an elevation of all the doors or windows, and then they'll be indicated with a letter. So, you know, this door right here, it looks like it's like a door with a side light, and that might be door G or something. And over here there might be 3 or 4 different door Gs, and one of them's 3 feet wide and one of them's 4 feet wide. So it's like the same elevation, it's just different size. So you can indicate those differences in this deeper schedule. And then down here there'll also be a hardware schedule, and this will tell you, does the door have a lock, does it have a fob, does it have, what kind of hinges does it have? And that hardware schedule will maybe like hardware schedule G, and there'll be a column over here in the door schedule for that. And so here's sort of what those things look like in a more visible way. So there's that legend, and you know, this shows that it's a flush door, a double panel door. And so wherever I go down to the door schedule and I see an A, I know, okay, it's this flush door. And if I see a B, I know it's this double panel door. You get the width, the height, the thickness, the material, solid core wood in this case, and then the finish, paint 2, or P2, and then you would go to the finish schedule and you'd find out P2 is paint 2, and that's, you know, whatever color is indicated there. And then in the schedule, you'll have a rating. So the door will either be not rated, 20-minute rated, 45-minute rated, you know, any type of rating will be indicated here. Then here's the hardware group. So, you know, this door has hardware group 15. You come down here, it's the waiting room to the lobby, it's door 110, it's hardware group 15. And so this is telling you about what kind of lever set handle it has. This is the hinges, and then whether or not it has a wall stop. And then signage, the left doors, require some sort of signage next to it. That'll be there, and then the location of the door. That doors is there too. After door schedules, you have door, window, finish schedules. You'll come to the elevations, and the elevations will have, over here on the right, these are elevation targets, which are telling you the height of each floor line. And some of the things you can look for on elevations is this letter T indicates a tempered window. These are exhaust vents for either stove hood or dryer or something like that, and they have a requirement. They need to be more than 3 feet from an operable window or door. So if I take this lower corner of the window and I draw a 3-foot radius, it's this circle. And you can see that circle, it's not a real circle, it's just a circle drawn on here to make sure we're not overlapping any window. And then this bottom corner is right here, and that's the radius for this circle, and it's not overlapping the window. And if it's overlapping like this part of the window, then you can a fixed part of the window. The triangle on the window indicates that it's an operable window. These are casement windows. If it was a single hung window, it would have an arrow pointing, that it goes up. So from elevations, you have sections, and we got to look at those a little bit when we saw the flow of floor plan through section, through wall section, through detail, how you can follow that along. Sections are really just sort of important for showing where we have rated floor ceiling assemblies, and then we get to the wall sections for more detail. And then you saw the wall sections already, and things we like to look at. This is like a tuck under parking, and so this dimension says 8.2 minimum because we have accessible parking in here, so we need to make sure, when this is completely finished out with the siding or stucco or whatever it is, that it's, we maintain that dimension. Enlarged bathroom and kitchen plans. So this is an enlarged bathroom plan where you see the accessibility clearances are a really important part of that. You need this 5-foot turning circle, and you need these rectangle clearances with knee space underneath these fixtures or near these fixtures. And then the dark gray are the door clearances. So this looks like a really busy plan, but really you're just sort of using the plan to see that you have the clearances and then to see these keynotes, and from there you can go over to the keynotes and the elevations. And the kitchen plan is similar, and you saw this a little bit in the drawing convention. Okay, so interior elevations, we talked about how this is the marker for the interior elevation. This is the floor plan. You can see this marker, and it would say A6.19, and then 17 or something, and then here's 17, or instead of 13, I guess, not A. 6.19. So you can see, what that wall looks like with the windows, and if there's any vents or diffusers on that wall. So reflected ceiling plans are, you're laying in the ground looking up at the ceiling, and this is where you can see light fixtures, fans, supply air from the mechanical units, return air, soffits, and ceiling materials. And a lot of times, there's a call for acoustical ceiling material, and you'll see that on the RCP.
All right. Okay. So now that you know everything there is to know about architectural drawings, and you are not overwhelmed at all, I'm going to take you through some of the consultant drawings that would also be part of the drawing set. And I won't go as in depth as we just did with the architectural drawings, but it's important to know what the different disciplines are providing, who is showing what in their drawings, and what some of their call-outs and markers and symbols look like. So civil engineering will show more site information and sometimes off-site information as well, the stuff that is part of the project but is outside of the property line. They'll show water and utilities, they'll show parking lot paving and grading, and they'll show existing infrastructure and things that are either going to remain or need to be removed on the site before the project gets started. Your structural engineering drawings will show you your slab plans or your foundation plans. They'll show you the framing for your upper levels and the framing for your roof, and any unique conditions where you have something special that has some sort of special structure to hold it up. Landscape architecture, again, is site information. They're gonna have planting trees, existing trees. They're gonna have your ground cover, any kind of fancy, fun paving work, paving patterns and things like that. They're gonna have on their drawings. Irrigation information will be on landscape drawings. MEP, how you're conditioning your building, your community spaces, your units. Electrical will have your power, communication, lighting, and then plumbing is gonna have all of your plumbing fixtures and drains and venting. Interior design is going to have anything like finishes, flooring, cabinetry, things like that that are not taken care of already by architectural. And so all of these drawings will find their way into the drawing set as well. And there's typically an industry standard for the order in which the drawings show up. It's usually, at least in our drawing sets, and this is typical for most drawing sets, you have like kind of your general information sheets, and then your civil, then your architectural, structural, MEP, landscape, anything else kind of after that. Interior design is often just kind of tucked into the center of the architectural sheets. Sometimes it's elsewhere in the set, but that's kind of what we're used to seeing. So here's just an example of a civil engineering plan. And so it's going to be kind of hard to read up here, but they'll show property lines on their drawings, and they'll show some existing, they'll show the utilities that are like in the street and where they're coming into the site. They usually have some sort of legend that tells you what some of their symbols are, and often their lines will say like 6-inch W, and that'll be, you have a 6-inch water line in the street, or it will say SS for sanitary sewer, which is your sewer, or SD will be your storm drain. And they'll have kind of all of that information just kind of running across all crazy, because it's all under there, right? It's all under the ground. So to zoom in on our example, so this little snippet shows the parking area, which is kind of a collaborative design between architectural and civil, because they're probably doing the pavement, but we're kind of figuring where we want our accessible parking stalls and where our EV is going to go. And then on this particular project, they have like a large storm water infiltration system under the parking area that they're showing. And so they've got a couple of drains on the site, and they're showing how that water is getting from the rest of the site to that infiltration vent. So on the left side, here's a structural engineering framing plan, and I've zoomed in on just a corner of it over here to see it a little bit bigger. So on your structural drawings, you're going to see the direction that your framing members are running. You're going to see your shear walls. Those are going to be like bigger pieces of plywood that, you know, they don't really want you to interrupt with a bunch of other stuff, because they want that wall to remain uninterrupted. And it's usually, this little triangle symbol usually indicates a shear wall, and it gives a length for it. So that's kind of an industry standard of what you might see on a structural drawing. They'll have their own detailed callouts that go to their structural details. So they'll usually have their plans kind of similar to us. They'll have a series of plan sheets. They might have a series of large plan sheets, and then they'll have some detailed note sheets. So if you want to know, okay, what exactly is going on at the intersection between this corridor and the framing that's holding up this corridor and the framing running in the other direction of this unit, I'm going to go check out this detail and see how those two things are coming together. Here is a landscape architecture sheet on the left, and so they've got a planting schedule down below, and each of their plants have a little symbol, and there's more information about the species and the size of the plant and all of the things that you might want to know about all the plants. They're usually showing existing trees are like often shown as like a dashed line. Or it might be, I believe this project had some off-site work as well as on-site, and so there may have been some trees that were gonna be part of that offsite work, and so they're on a different drawing dashed in here. And then you're seeing sidewalks and how all of that is interacting. We've got some special, unique, like painting patterns going on. We have ground cover, and all of that is shown on the landscape plan. And as Erin mentioned, like, we might get the landscape and civil DWG line work, and then we layer it onto ours, and we're all kind of showing each other's information as well as our own. But there's, you know, a certain lens that each discipline is showing on their sheets. And so we are not going to have this level of planting information on our drawing, but we do have, you know, these same sidewalks shown. But this is how landscape wants them to be, how their paving patterns are going to work. And if there's different colors to the concrete and things like that, all of that would be found on the landscape plans. These are an example of enlarged unit plans in the NEP drawings, and so we've pulled them separate so that you can see what is showing on each NE and P. So mechanical is going to have all of your supply and return air grills. They're going to show venting from your kitchens and your bathrooms and where your soffits are going to need to go. And we typically have furniture and fixtures and things like that all turned on in these plans, so you can see how the space lays out. You can see, okay, you know, each of these rooms is being heated and cooled, and the bathroom has a exhaust fan, and the exhaust fan in the kitchen, and all of these things are aligning well or not aligning well with exterior windows, and kind of see all of that overlaid on the architectural floor plan. And then electrical, very similar. We've got everything turned on so we can see where our light fixtures are. We can see some of these little symbols. And I believe you all have some little cheat sheets on your table, and if you don't, grab one from us that tell you what some of these little symbols are. But we've got all of our outlets and switches, and you know, near the TV, if the developer desires it, there's, you know, a communication port where they can plug in their devices, whatever it might be. So you can see where all of these things are intended to be installed. Plumbing, similarly, you can see where all the plumbing fixtures are, and then we can overlay all of that all together, and you can kind of see how it's all working together. And NEP is not going to show you a combined plan like this, but ideally, they have talked amongst themselves and made sure that all of their stuff is coordinated and they're not overlapping each other. And then interior design can vary quite a bit, but from project to project, but often you'll get some pretty serious schedules from interior design. They might be picking out fixtures, like light fixtures, plumbing fixtures, or they might just be doing finishes and cabinetry and flooring. And I'll zoom in on these two that are highlighted in red. So the one on this side shows a little snippet of some flooring information, and this one I think is countertops. And so there's usually some sort of identifying ID number and a swatch that shows you color and kind of texture, and some more technical information, product name, whatever you might need to know. And then what you're going to see in your drawing set is some sort of floor plan that shows graphically what those surfaces are, what the finishes look like. They've got their own elevation tags that are pointing at, you know, if you go to this drawing on this sheet, you'll see what this wall is going to look like, and they're calling out information about each finish that they're showing. They have their own legend that gives information. And then they have interior elevations as well. And sometimes in drawing sets, the architectural interior elevations will incorporate this information too, if it's simple. But it looks like for this particular design, there's some sort of wall material and pattern, so there's dimensions provided, and there might be some little views of like this waterfall countertop, and we're showing light fixtures and the heights of them, and things like that that are just not shown in the architectural because we're showing kind of bigger picture. And once you get to this level, we need another level's worth of drawings and details and information. So I think we're going to skip over this walkthrough. So our next activity, we're going to take a look at some drawings. So everybody's got drawing sets on their table, and I know you guys have been flipping through them already, and that's awesome. So we're going to share some questions on the screen and give you guys a few minutes to kind of flip through the sets and see if you can find the answers to some of these. And then we'll give you maybe 5 minutes to do that, and then we'll have time for questions. So the first question, take a look through your drawing set, see if you can find the community building information, or can you find the project manager's office and figure out the square footage of it. How many mobility units does the project have? What type of flooring is proposed for the community room? Will this project have any deferred submittals? Can you locate the section marker on the floor plan and find that section drawing?